The night begins quietly, the way an old memory returns. Slow, unannounced, almost weightless. The air drifts across the sleeping planet, carrying whispers of deserts, of mountain passes, of frozen rivers that have not felt footsteps in centuries. Far from the crowded lights of cities, the world expands into distance. Each horizon opens like a deep breath. The wind glides over places that have no names, where the map stops and silence begins. In these corners, time moves differently. It does not measure progress or growth or loss. It simply lingers, patient and whole. Beyond the reach of human sound, there are valleys where clouds form and dissolve without witness. There are forests that have never been cut, oceans whose waves speak only to themselves. Mountains rise in the dark, their slopes untouched by rope or road, their peaks still unknown. Some lands remain frozen beneath eternal snow, others shimmer in endless heat where sand drifts like thought. Each one continues without us, not rejecting, not hiding, just existing in its own rhythm. Distance and danger are only forms of protection, quiet guardians that preserve what has never been altered. The earth does not build walls, it builds space. Its boundaries are drawn in mist and wind, not in stone. These places are not forbidden, only beyond reach. They are reminders of how small human motion is against the stillness of the world. If we were to stand on their edges, we would hear nothing but air and heartbeat, the faint hum of life that has no need for us. The planet does not depend on our gaze. It was complete long before we arrived, and it will remain complete long after we fall silent again. So tonight, we drift across that vastness, moving gently through the unseen. We do not explore, we listen. We do not measure, we rest. The unknown does not call with curiosity, but with calm. Every gust of wind carries the same message, that the world is larger than understanding, older than memory, and perfectly content in its solitude. Somewhere beyond the horizon, mountains breathe through the dark, and waves fold into themselves without end. These are not places meant to be reached. They are places meant to remind us of stillness, of patience, of the quiet strength in distance. As the night deepens, the sound of the earth softens. What was noise becomes rhythm, what was motion becomes ease. The human world fades into a low hum, and only the timeless remains. Wide, steady, endless. Here, in this calm expanse, we remember that some mysteries are not meant to be solved. Some are meant to be felt gently, like the wind passing through the dark, reminding us that silence, too, is alive. Distant and untouched lands, the far silenced. Beyond the last roads, where the hum of cities dissolves into wind, there lies a silence that has never been broken. It begins softly, like a long breath drawn by the earth itself, rising through plains where even the grass bends slowly. There are no lights here, no sound of machines, no direction, but the horizon. The land stretches endlessly, quiet and bare, its stillness shaped by centuries of solitude. It is not an emptiness, but a fullness of another kind, where every sound, every movement is absorbed into calm. Mountains rise without paths, vast shoulders of stone that catch the drifting clouds and hold them in place. The air around them thins until breath becomes thought, light becomes silver dust upon their ridges. No one watches the peaks, and so they remain perfect, unnamed, unmeasured, undisturbed. From a distance they seem to float, as though time itself rests upon their slopes. Snow gathers quietly, melting and returning in endless rhythm. The silence here is not heavy, it is patient, like something that understands waiting better than we ever could. In the valleys below, light moves as if remembering its way. It falls over stones no hand has ever turned, water no bridge has ever crossed. The streams flow without destination, their sound swallowed by distance. There are no footprints, no marks of fire, no traces of roads that might have been. The only motion is the slow drift of clouds reflected in shallow pools, the occasional whisper of wind weaving through grass untouched by steps. To walk here, even in imagination, is to feel the world before language, before borders, before sound had meaning. The air itself feels ancient, thin, clear, carrying no scent but the faint cool of earth and ice. Each gust passes like a memory, brushing against the skin of the world and vanishing again. It moves through canyons carved long before our histories began, shaping the land quietly, endlessly, without witness. Time does not rush here. It lingers, soft as falling snow. The stones remember the weight of glaciers, the rivers remember the sea, and everything breathes in slow unison. These places are not lost, they are not waiting to be found. They exist beyond the idea of discovery, beyond the reach of need. To call them forgotten would be to suggest they once belonged to us. But they never did. They belong to themselves, complete, unaltered, whole. In their stillness there is no longing, no sense of absence. They have all they require, wind, light, and the endless turning of seasons. What we might call isolation is, to them, perfect balance. As evening folds across their ridges, shadows deepen like ink, poured gently over the earth. The silence changes tone, becoming denser, cooler, like water filling the air. Stars begin to appear, not as distant fires, but as quiet reflections scattered across the sky. The night does not descend here, it simply arrives, seamless, inevitable. The land accepts it without struggle, without ceremony. There is no difference between day and dark, only the slow transition of light across stone. Time passes here the way snow falls, slowly, without witness, without purpose. Each flake lands and disappears into the pattern of all the others. Seasons drift one into another like breath into sleep. Nothing demands to be remembered, and yet everything remains. The mountain holds its shape, the valley its calm, the sky its endless pulse of color. In such stillness, even thought becomes lighter, quieter. The noise of memory fades, leaving only awareness, soft and wide. Perhaps that is the meaning of the far silence. Not emptiness, but a form of completion. The world continuing in its own rhythm, untouched by our hurry. The land, unspoken and unclaimed, existing exactly as it must. Here, the earth is not waiting for visitors or stories or names. It is simply being endlessly. And when we listen from afar, through distance and time, we can almost hear that stillness, moving like a slow current beneath the world, patient, unbroken, whole. Lands without footprints. Across distant seas, beyond the last horizon of sound and light, there are islands that wait in quiet solitude, resting behind walls of storm and tide. They rise and disappear with the shifting weather, half real, half imagined. The waves surrounding them are not meant to be crossed. They twist and fold, speaking an old language of wind and salt, a language that belongs only to the sea. Ships pass far away, tracing wide circles to avoid the unknown currents. And still the islands remain, watching, unmoved, as if time itself has chosen to leave them untouched. Their shores lie hidden beneath clouds and spray, where the ocean folds into itself like a mirror. From above, they appear only in fragments, a stretch of green, a sliver of sand, a sharp ridge where the light catches stone. To those who have seen them from afar, they seem unreal, as if the earth were remembering a dream it once had. Some are covered in mist that never lifts, others gleam like pale bone beneath the sun. There are places where snow drifts into the sea, and others where the air ripples with heat, so thick it seems to hum. Each exists in its own rhythm, unbothered by the turning of calendars or the weight of maps. No law forbids entry, no fence blocks the way. What keeps us distant is older than any decree. It is the will of nature itself, quiet but absolute. The ocean guards what it loves with patience. Waves build and break endlessly, erasing every trace that might have been left behind. To reach such shores would mean to challenge not a rule, but the elements themselves. The storms do not rage out of anger. They simply continue, as they always have, as they always will. In their repetition lies a kind of order, a balance that does not need protection, only respect. Some of these islands rest under blankets of frost, where even the sound of ice cracking is swallowed by air, too cold to carry echo. There the sea glitters with fragments of light, and the horizon disappears into white. Others burn under the weight of heat, their sand moving like liquid, their rocks glowing as though the sun were buried beneath them. Each extreme holds its own beauty, its own stillness. Both are unreachable, and both are whole. The world does not divide them into opposites. Only we do. For the earth, they are two halves of the same breath, one frozen, one aflame. To imagine setting foot there is to imagine silence itself. No footprints to follow, no paths to mark direction. The land remembers no one and forgets nothing. Every grain of sand lies where it should, every leaf turns when the wind allows. There are no signs of arrival or departure. The islands belong entirely to themselves, sustained by the rhythm of tide and sky. In their stillness, there is no emptiness, only the steady pulse of life continuing without witness. Distance and silence work together as guardians. The space between what we know and what we cannot reach becomes sacred in its own way. It is the pause between heartbeats, the quiet moment before dawn when the world seems suspended. We are not kept out by hostility, but by balance, a silent agreement between what is living and what must remain untouched. The sea enforces that agreement with patience, washing away curiosity, replacing it with calm. From afar, when the air is clear and the sun low, their outlines appear for a moment, faint, fragile, hovering on the edge of perception. A dark ridge, a pale curve of sand, the suggestion of a forest caught between waves and wind. Then, as light shifts, they vanish again, folded back into horizon and cloud. Their disappearance feels less like loss and more like mercy, as if the world is gently reminding us that some things are not meant to stay visible. In this wide stillness, the earth feels whole again. The noise of motion and ambition fades, replaced by the sound of distance. Soft, infinite, steady. The islands breathe with the tides, and the sea breathes with them. Together they create a rhythm older than history, older than thought. To listen from afar is enough. To know that such places exist, untouched, unnamed, unmeasured, is to be reminded that the planet still carries mystery. And so they wait behind the storms, beyond the reach of ships and the memory of men. Not waiting for discovery, but continuing their quiet cycle of light, wind, and water. The world in its gentlest form remains complete there, beyond footprints, beyond noise, beyond need. In that distance, there is peace, and in that peace, the faint, steady pulse of the living earth, breathing slowly in its own eternal rhythm. Islands of Silence. The Forbidden Shores. Across the quiet oceans lie islands where no visitor may land, where the water itself seems to guard the boundaries between what is known and what is left untouched. The waves rise and fall in endless rhythm, drawing near to the beaches only to retreat again, as though protecting what lies beyond the surf. The sea is not hostile here. It is watchful. It moves with a kind of ancient patience, shaping the shore but never crossing it. Every crest of foam is a reminder that some places are meant to remain distant, not for our punishment, but for their peace. The air above these islands feels older, thicker, filled with the scent of salt and leaves that have never been disturbed. Birds circle overhead but do not scatter, as if they too have learned the rhythm of quiet living. The forests beneath them are dense and slow, their trees layered with moss that carries the memory of centuries. Roots twist deep into soil untouched by human hands, holding the island together like a living memory. Beneath those roots the ground is dark and cool, a place where rain whispers through the layers of time. Every leaf that falls lands softly, unbroken, completing a pattern that has existed longer than language. Here, rare species move through the shade in silence. Some are small, their colors muted to match the forest's calm. Others are bright but still, their wings folding like paper, their movements as measured as the tide. None of them fear what they do not know. They are part of a rhythm older than us, the steady pulse of life that has never needed an audience. The forest breathes, the sea breathes, and together they form a slow conversation that never ends. In this cycle there is no noise, no urgency, no need for change. At the edge of the trees, the land meets the ocean with quiet precision. The sand is pale and unmarked, its surface smoothed by the wind, not by feet. When waves reach it, they linger for a moment before drawing back, erasing their own trace as they go. No footprints remain, no signs of passage, only the soft memory of motion fading into stillness. The shore remembers nothing but the tide, its only companion, its only rhythm. It is a kind of perfection we can only observe from afar. The silence of these islands is not emptiness. It is fullness contained within itself, the weight of a world that has no need to speak. The trees hold forgotten songs, not of words but of patterns. Wind passing through branches, rain tapping on bark, waves echoing against stone. Each sound belongs to the next, forming a melody without beginning or end. Time does not count here. It drifts circular and calm, like the motion of the sea that surrounds it. Even the storms that pass above seem gentler here. Rain falls like slow percussion, thunder rolls far away, and lightning fades before reaching the horizon. The islands absorb it all and return to stillness as if nothing had happened. Nature does not resist itself, it only changes form. That is why these shores endure, not through strength, but through quiet adaptation. From the distance, ships may see them rise like dark shapes against the mist. For a moment, they seem near, reachable. Then the fog thickens and they disappear, leaving only water and horizon. The sailors say the sea folds over them like a blanket, keeping them hidden. Perhaps it does. Perhaps the earth, in its wisdom, protects what is not meant to be seen too closely. What remains unseen cannot be damaged, and what cannot be reached remains pure. These islands exist apart from the world we know, kept safe not by fences or guards, but by distance and understanding. They do not invite or refuse, they simply are. And so we watch from afar, letting imagination take the place of travel, letting respect replace desire. The decision not to disturb is its own kind of reverence, a quiet act of care for what endures beyond us. When the ocean settles and night begins to fall, The islands fade into the darkness as though absorbed by it. The stars return, reflected on the water's surface, and for a brief moment, the world seems whole again, complete, balanced, breathing in the rhythm of its own silence. In that stillness, we find the truth the islands have always known, that peace is not the absence of sound, but the harmony of things untouched, alive, and at rest. The Sleeping Isles. There are islands the sea hides, not from malice, but from care. They lie scattered across vast waters, wrapped in quiet danger, sleeping beneath layers of mist and time. The air that drifts above them carries faint traces of what once was. The sharp tang of forgotten storms, the memory of ancient fires, the echo of life that grew too wild to endure. These islands are both alive and resting, their silence not the silence of death, but of recovery. To look upon them, even from afar, is to feel the fragile balance that holds the world together. The uneasy peace between creation and decay. The wind that circles these shores is never still. It hums with the residue of change, of things that once moved and now lie still. Some of these lands were shaped by violence. Volcanic ash hardened into black cliffs, forests burned and reborn, coastlines carved by waves that remember every storm. Others are haunted by poisons left behind, remnants of human curiosity, experiments sealed away by time and guilt. The ground beneath their trees remembers what it carried, metals that should have stayed buried, fires that should never have burned. Even now, the soil breathes with caution, holding the memory of danger quietly in its depths. The air here feels heavy, as if each breath must move through memory itself. It carries scents that do not belong to this age. The faint bitterness of rust, the sweetness of decayed fruit, the salt of storms unending. Creatures that dwell in such places live without haste. Some glow faintly in the darkness, feeding on what little the land provides. Others move through the ruins of forests that have learned to survive without sunlight. They do not flee when thunder rolls, for they know it will pass. Everything on these islands understands stillness, patience, endurance. To protect both life and memory, the borders of these places remain closed. Governments and caretakers, guided more by respect than by fear, mark them on maps but never set foot upon them. They are watched from afar, their boundaries traced by satellites and sea buoys, their secrets left untouched. No one owns them, no one truly can. The ocean itself enforces their solitude. Waves rise around them like sentinels, constant and unyielding. The sea guards what the earth cannot. From the decks of distant ships their shapes sometimes appear when the mist lifts for a breath of time. A pale ridge, a low shadow, a line of trees trembling against the horizon, and then gone again, swallowed by vapor and light. In that fleeting glimpse we are reminded of how much of the world remains unmeasured. These islands exist beyond possession, beyond understanding. Their isolation is not exile, it is preservation. They are reminders that the world still holds places where human presence is neither needed nor welcomed. The storms that pass over them rise without warning. They form from still air, build themselves from silence, and vanish again before the sky clears. No warning, no pattern, only motion, pure and free. Lightning strikes the sea, wind tears through branches, and rain falls in thick sheets that erase every sound. Then, as quickly as they began, the storms dissolve. The islands lie beneath the fading clouds, untouched, unbothered, their stillness restored. They have learned the rhythm of renewal, chaos followed by calm, destruction followed by deep rest. Caretakers, scientists, and wanderers who watch from afar speak of these places with a strange tenderness. They are aware that what lies within is not only danger, but memory. Each toxic pond, each broken tree, each quiet stretch of sand carries a story of mistakes, of endurance, of the earth healing in its own time. To leave these lands alone is to give them that time. To close their borders is not to imprison them, but to let them recover. When the mist thickens again and the outlines fade, the sea grows quiet. The waves slow, the wind falls back into rhythm. The islands slip beneath the moving water, as if returning to sleep. From afar, the ocean looks unbroken, seamless, as though nothing lies beneath. Yet those who know the sea understand that something still breathes there, slow, steady, waiting. The world remains wide and untamed, far larger than our reach, far deeper than our memory. And so the sleeping isles remained hidden but alive, distant but real. Their silence is the planet's exhale, a deep sigh of recovery. In that rest lies an unspoken truth, that not all beauty invites us closer, and not all danger seeks to harm. Some things simply need to be left alone. And when the fog returns, covering them once more, the earth feels whole again, breathing gently beneath the waves, guarding its own forgotten dreams. Human boundaries, walls built by hands. Not every forbidden place belongs to nature. Some rise from the quiet precision of human making, structures born not from chaos but from the need to contain it. These are walls of concrete and steel, sealed corridors beneath the ground, towers without windows, rooms without voices. They are not monuments, not temples, not prisons. They exist for something quieter, control, preservation, endurance. The air within them carries the faint vibration of energy held in stillness. Here, silence is not emptiness. It is a design, measured and maintained, shaped as carefully as the walls themselves. The world outside moves quickly, but in these places time slows to the pace of machinery. Beneath mountains, deep under deserts, or hidden behind unmarked gates, there are laboratories where light glows in constant rhythm. No sun, no shadow, only the steady white hum of artificial day. Machines breathe softly, their cables spread through the walls like veins, pulsing with invisible currents. Technicians once walked here, their voices low, their steps deliberate. Some rooms still hum with their purpose. Others have been left to rest, sealed off, lights still burning. In these buried chambers, even air feels mechanical, filtered, cooled, replaced again and again, until it no longer remembers what wind is. The silence inside these structures is thick, shaped by design. It absorbs movement. A footstep vanishes before it reaches the next wall. The sound of breathing becomes distant, like memory. Every door closes with a sigh, every lock turns with purpose. You can sense it. The weight of caution layered over the years, the care that builds upon itself until it becomes atmosphere. Nothing here is accidental. Even stillness has a schedule, even quiet is engineered. The absence of sound is not neglect, it is control. Some of these places are archives built to hold the delicate threads of memory itself. In rooms kept at the same temperature for decades, paper sleeps under glass. Shelves rise like walls of their own, filled with names, symbols, the thin voices of history. To enter such a space is to walk through a kind of frozen time. The air smells faintly of dust, metal, and patience. Workers move slowly, touching nothing without purpose. The smallest motion matters. The light hums low, never harsh, never direct. In this endless quiet, knowledge becomes fragile, and therefore sacred. Others are bunkers carved into the earth like long thoughts that never ended. Their doors are thicker than the walls of houses, designed to outlast storm, fire, or human memory itself. Inside them, air sleeps cold against concrete, and the world above might as well not exist. Some of these vaults guard archives of seeds, others weapons, others mysteries no one speaks of anymore. In all of them there is a kind of reverence, though no prayer is said. They are kept alive by maintenance, by the hum of generators, the flicker of distant monitors, the quiet inspection of systems that must never fail. Even abandoned, such places do not lose their stillness. Time gathers here differently. Dust falls but does not settle evenly. Rust forms in silence. The walls do not crumble. They wait. You could walk these corridors and feel the echo of human hands in every bolt and wire. These are not ruins, but pauses. Moments of civilization stretched out indefinitely, preserved by purpose alone. The further you walk, the more the silence begins to hum, as if remembering the heartbeat of the world outside. Above ground, there are other fortresses, invisible in plain sight. Windowless buildings sit among warehouses, their walls smooth and unmarked. Cameras blink softly at the corners. No sound leaks from within. Trucks come and go, unhurried, leaving no trace. Inside, people move with precision. Their work is quiet, their steps measured. They do not speak loudly. They do not linger. They know the rhythm of their place. The hum of servers, the low vibration of generators, the steady breathing of systems that cannot stop. This becomes their world. They work inside a pulse that feels neither alive nor dead, only constant. The architecture of these human boundaries is both logic and ritual. The corridors stretch endlessly, symmetrical and silent. Every few meters a door repeats, identical to the last. Light runs above like veins of thought, pale and cold. The walls do not echo, they absorb. Each turn looks like the one before, until direction itself loses meaning. You could walk for hours and never know how far you've gone. That is the design, not to trap, but to quiet the mind, to remove the illusion of progress. In stillness, everything remains contained. If you listen long enough, the silence reveals its pattern. Beneath the still air runs a low vibration, the hum of energy restrained. It is the sound of control, of systems holding themselves steady. Power moves quietly through cables, heat dissolves through vents, water circulates in unseen pipes. The entire building breathes like a single machine. Even the smallest sound, a drip, a click, a distant thrum, feels monumental here. These are the breaths of structure, the heartbeat of human restraint. Not all forbidden places are born from secrecy. Some are built from care. There are vaults of medicine, rooms of fragile research, archives of art and language, all protected by silence. We close these doors not to hide what we fear, but to preserve what we love, what cannot survive the noise of the world. Stillness becomes a form of protection. The walls are not barriers against curiosity, but gestures of respect toward fragility. In the end, these places remind us of a truth we rarely speak, that silence is part of creation. The things we keep still are not forgotten, they are simply resting. Behind each wall lies the echo of human caution. The understanding that some knowledge is too bright, too heavy, too infinite to live uncontained. And so we build our quiet fortresses, our careful spaces, our boundaries of intention. Inside them, the world hums softly, like a thought held between breaths. These walls, built by hands, are not symbols of fear, but of balance. They keep the unseen steady, the unknown safe, and the remembered alive. Their silence is not hollow but full, filled with the soft weight of everything we have learned, everything we have chosen to guard. And while the world above moves, these silent places remain, breathing beneath it, patient as stone, alive with the faint hum of everything we are not ready to lose. The silent facilities. Beyond the gates, the quiet deepens. The air thickens with stillness, as if sound itself has been asked to wait outside. Guards stand watch, not for danger, but for order. Their presence less about defense and more about rhythm, the maintenance of calm precision. Every motion within these boundaries follows a pattern, every light, a signal. Nothing here is spontaneous. The flow of movement, the timing of doors, the pulse of machines, all move with the same slow intelligence, one that measures purpose in silence rather than noise. Inside, corridors stretch long and deliberate, their walls washed in pale light that neither flickers nor fades. The floors shine faintly, reflecting the world above in fragments. There are no windows, only screens that simulate daylight. Every hum of machinery is contained, wrapped in insulation, engineered not to disturb. In this place, mystery is not created by secrets, but by control, the kind of silence that grows from precision. It feels as if every sound is accounted for, every motion rehearsed until even breathing fits the pattern. Guards move quietly, almost without footsteps. They check monitors, adjust nothing, and then return to stillness. In the rooms beyond, machines blink with quiet awareness. Their lights flash in code, unseen by human eyes. Laboratories hum below the surface, not in urgency but in endurance. Data flows like water, unbroken, unseen, unjudged. Here, the line between life and system blurs. The machines perform with obedience, and humans adapt to their rhythm. It is not dominance, but harmony, the kind born of habit and repetition. There are no stories told here, no laughter echoing in the halls. The people who work within these walls do not speak of what they do, they simply continue. Their silence is not secrecy, but discipline, a mutual understanding that the work itself demands invisibility. In these rooms, mystery does not depend on what happens, but on what remains unseen. The purpose of this quiet is not to hide, but to protect. The data, the process, the fragile balance of systems too intricate for interruption. Even the air feels deliberate, its temperature set to an exact degree. The lights above cast no shadow, they are positioned to eliminate uncertainty. Every room is an ecosystem of order designed to function without expression. What lives here is not chaos or creativity, but endurance, the long hum of persistence. These are the silent facilities of civilization, the hidden lungs that keep the larger body breathing. Human creation hides itself easily, not out of fear, but through habit. The practice of control becomes instinct, the separation of spaces a kind of faith in structure. We build layers of distance not to exclude, but to preserve stability. Behind every locked door lies the logic of restraint, a language of switches and sensors that never speak but always listen. To those outside, it may look like secrecy. To those within, it is balance, the steady pulse of order holding back the weight of chaos. Outside, the world rushes forward, loud and bright. Within, time thickens, stretching into intervals of precision. A clock ticks somewhere unseen, marking seconds that do not hurry. Each sound feels measured, intentional. The hum of electricity, the whisper of ventilation, the low vibration of machinery, all blend into one endless tone. It is the sound of power contained, energy compressed into patience. When night falls above ground, these places do not change. Their lights remain steady, their rhythm unbroken. People come and go in silence, their steps absorbed by the floor. There is no conversation, no hesitation. Even rest is structured, shifts overlapping like gears in motion. The world outside dreams and forgets, but these facilities do not sleep. They continue, calm and tireless, turning information into stillness, motion into continuity. If one were to listen closely, the quiet itself would sound alive, a low, steady resonance, deeper than words. It is not the quiet of emptiness, but of concentration. The silence breathes, it moves through wires, through steel, through the endless repetition of function, and though no one speaks, everything communicates. Machines hum to each other, signals pass through walls, sensors blink in acknowledgement. It is a language without speech, fluent in precision, incapable of pause. Here, power and secrecy merge into calm restraint. The world outside remains unaware, moving in color and noise, while within, everything continues under a slow, deliberate pulse. The gates stay closed, not in hostility, but in necessity. The quiet is not broken because it does not need to be. It endures, infinite and composed, a silence built by hands, kept alive by intention, and sustained by the unspoken understanding that some order must remain invisible. The fragile heritage, echoes of the past. Across the quiet corners of the earth lie places where time has learned to move softly, lands kept apart not by walls, but by reverence. The ruins of temples stand like the ribs of forgotten giants, their stones rounded and worn smooth by the brush of wind and rain, by centuries of unseen hands. Moss grows where prayers once rose, and sunlight moves gently across carvings that no longer speak, but still remember. These are not places of grandeur now, but of surrender, where the earth has reclaimed what people once tried to make eternal. Among them are caves that breathe with the slow pulse of ancient memory. On their darkened walls, drawings linger, figures of bison, horses, hunters, and stars, each line faint but enduring. The pigments, once mixed from ochre and ash, have dulled with age, yet their presence still hums beneath the surface. They are not decoration, but declaration, messages left for no one and for everyone. When light touches them, even faintly, they seem to stir, as though remembering the warmth of the hands that made them. Inside such silence, sound feels like intrusion. The air is thick, almost sacred, carrying the scent of stone, dust, and old fire. You can almost sense the people who stood there thousands of years ago, breathing beside these same walls. Their lives have vanished, but their gestures remain, a kind of immortal tenderness preserved in pigment and shadow. The paintings are not art in our sense of the word. They are survival, turned into expression, the need to mark one's place in a world too vast to understand. Each mark, each curve, is a whisper across centuries. They remind us that history is not only written in books or carved in monuments. Sometimes it lives in the faint trace of a fingertip, the careful outline of a hand pressed against stone. These echoes are older than language, older than any memory we can name. They belong to the time before time, when thought was shaped by hunger and hope, when creation was not for fame, but for presence. To stand near them is to feel the pulse of something both fragile and infinite. Yet to step closer would be to erase them. The warmth of breath, the oils of skin, even the vibration of a footfall could steal what has endured for millennia. So we do not enter. We stand at the edge where light spills gently into the mouth of the cave, and we let the shadows hold their stories. The wind moves past, carrying nothing but dust and reverence. It is enough to witness without touching, to know without taking. Outside, the landscape folds around these hidden sanctuaries, grass bending in quiet waves, stones lying half buried in the soil. The sky above moves at its own unhurried pace, clouds drifting as they have since before the first mark was made. Time does not pause here, but it softens, bends, forgets to measure itself. The world feels older but also calmer, as though memory and silence have agreed to keep one another company. To look upon such places is to be reminded that history breathes, not loudly but gently. It does not demand attention. It waits. Every ruin, every painting, every worn stone carries a faint hum of life still passing through it. And when we stand quietly enough, we can almost hear it. The echo of a hand on rock, the sigh of a tool carving into clay, the steady rhythm of a life long gone but not entirely lost. These are not ghosts, they are continuations, traces of what it means to be human, to leave behind a mark, simply to say, we were here. The earth keeps those messages close, beneath layers of soil and time, guarding them from the noise of the modern world. So we stay outside the threshold, where the air is cool and the light shifts gently across the stone. We do not enter, for to step forward would be to disturb a silence that belongs not to us, but to the past. Instead, we let the moment stand as it is, unbroken, patient, and whole. The cave breathes, the wind moves, the world continues, and somewhere within that stillness, history inhales once more, slow and steady, as if it has never stopped. The protected ruins. There are places where time itself seems to breathe more slowly, where the air holds a quiet weight that is neither sorrow nor reverence, but something gentler, something that waits. These are the protected ruins, the silent witnesses of our earliest ambitions and mistakes. The stones here do not speak, yet they remember, their edges softened by centuries of wind and rain, their shadows stretching like patient guardians over the earth. No one rules them now. The rulers, the builders, the dreamers who once shaped them are long gone, leaving behind walls that crumble with grace and dignity, refusing to vanish entirely. Each fragment becomes a syllable in a language we can no longer pronounce but still somehow understand. You walk here not as a tourist but as a listener. The silence carries stories too fragile for words. Beneath the broken arches, seeds have found shelter. Grass grows between the steps once polished by bare feet. The absence of fences feels deliberate, as if humanity finally agreed that the only true protection is distance, that preservation means not possession, but restraint. The wind moves freely through the corridors where once smoke rose from fires, where laughter echoed, where daily life unfolded without thought of the centuries to come. Now it is the wind that lives here, brushing against stone as softly as a sigh, reminding us that even ruins are alive in their own way. Light plays its quiet game, gliding across surfaces rough with age. In morning, it arrives like forgiveness, tender and slow. By afternoon it sharpens, filling the air with a golden warmth that seems to lift the dust into memory. At dusk the light withdraws, leaving a muted calm, the hour when the ruins belong to no one. Birds nest in what was once a doorway. A small tree bends from the center of a fallen tower. Nature does not reclaim these places out of hunger, but out of affection, covering the wounds of time with green patience. To stand within sight of such stillness is to feel both near and far from history. We want to reach out, to trace our fingers along the stone, to connect ourselves to the people who once shaped it. But we hesitate. That hesitation is the beginning of respect. We understand, at least dimly, that our presence can alter what we wish to preserve. So we remain at a distance, not out of fear, but out of recognition. The ruins do not need our hands. They need our absence. And in stepping back, we discover a deeper form of care, a silence that listens instead of takes. Archaeologists may catalogue these sites, assigning numbers and categories, but the truer archive lies in the air, in the faint echo between the walls, in the way sunlight touches the stone exactly as it did 1,000 years ago. Each gust of wind becomes an invisible page turned. Each season rewrites what was forgotten. The earth keeps its own records, and our role now is simply to let it continue. Sometimes travelers stumble upon these places unexpectedly, a hill where the ground breaks into the outline of old foundations, or a column lying half buried, its carvings faint but not lost. There is a strange calm in realizing how much has survived without us. No restoration, no guardrails, no explanation. Just endurance. What time could not erase, it softened. What weather destroyed, it transformed into something quieter. The beauty here does not announce itself. It hums, low and steady, like the memory of a song sung long ago. The stillness feels like a dialogue, one where we finally learn to speak less. For centuries, humanity built and broke, conquered and rebuilt, convinced that progress required motion. Here, motion has ceased, and yet something endures. The protected ruins show us that to guard is not to lock away, but to allow breathing space, to let what remains exist freely, unobserved, unbothered. It is an ethic of humility written into stone and silence. At sunset, shadows stretch across the empty paths. The temperature falls and the air fills with the faint scent of dust and lichen. Somewhere a bird calls once, then nothing. The mind quiets, following the rhythm of the ruins. Slow, patient, accepting. You realize how much of preservation is not about saving the past, but about allowing it to fade properly. Memory itself needs room to dissolve. In that dissolution, there is peace. We build walls to separate what is sacred from what is ordinary, but here, no such boundary exists. The sacredness comes from the open sky above and the restraint below. To protect is to refrain. To honor is to watch from afar. Our stillness becomes part of the landscape, a silent act of devotion to those who came before. We listen not for their voices, but for the echo of time itself, moving through what they left behind. And as you walk away, the ruins do not recede. They follow quietly within you like an afterimage behind closed eyes. You carry their patience, their calm refusal to vanish. In the distance, light fades completely, leaving only the outline of stone against the sky. Nothing more is needed. The ruins remain, protected not by walls or law, but by the gentleness of our collective silence, by the simple decision to let beauty survive in distance. Is this conversation helpful so far? Reasons for silence. The logic of distance. Every boundary, whether drawn by nature or by human hands, carries a reason older than law and deeper than fear. The world has always understood separation, how space itself can protect what is fragile, sacred, or still dangerous. Distance is not rejection. It is a quiet negotiation between survival and curiosity. There are lands where the air remains heavy with forgotten chemistry, places where spores sleep beneath the soil, and rivers that remember the touch of metal or fire. We learn to step lightly around them, not because we are forbidden, but because something in us still recognizes the language of caution that the earth speaks in whispers. Some boundaries protect life itself. They mark where radiation hums beneath the ground, or where storms of dust conceal toxins that never fully died. Scientists map these regions, but even without maps, the air tells its story. The wind changes temperature, the silence thickens. Animals turn aside. What seems empty is full of quiet instruction. And so we learn, not to conquer, but to respect. The logic of distance is not written in laws or warnings. It exists in the invisible agreement between the living and the land that shelters them. Other boundaries protect memory. These are not dangerous to the body, but to the soul's forgetfulness. Fields that were once battle sites, valleys that hold the bones of villages swallowed by war or flood, they are kept apart not for safety, but for stillness. To cross them without thought would be to erase what remains of what was suffered there. The land remembers, even when people forget. Grass grows over the trenches, and flowers rise through the ash, but beneath them rests a weight that demands reverence. Distance here is not about exclusion, it is about allowing the silence to finish its sentence. The logic is simple, almost humble. Boundaries are not walls of pride, but acts of care. We draw them to protect both sides, the world from us and us from what we are not yet ready to understand. Sometimes a sign will say, "Do not enter," and we imagine it as command, but often it is closer to a plea. Let this place remain as it is. Every untouched patch of wilderness, every restricted site, every zone of stillness carries that same request. By staying away, we are participating in preservation, even if all we do is breathe softly and watch from a distance. It is in distance that balance lives. The earth does not rush to reclaim what is ours, and we, in turn, learn patience. There is grace in not crossing a threshold. The mind slows when it cannot possess what it sees. Wonder grows in proportion to restraint. To stand before a horizon you cannot reach is to feel the ancient symmetry of respect. That what exists beyond your touch has the right to remain untouched. We think of care as closeness, but often the purest form of it is space. At dusk, when the light lowers itself gently across an unseen boundary, the world seems to affirm its own rules. The colors shift, gold to gray, heat to coolness, and everything settles back into its rhythm. The fields, the mountains, the sealed laboratories, the forgotten ruins, all breathe together in quiet continuity. Nothing rushes. The lines between things blur, not into chaos, but into calm. We are reminded that order is not always imposed. Sometimes it is simply respected. There are moments when the instinct to cross grows strong, when curiosity feels heavier than wisdom. But the logic of distance asks us to trust in what we do not need to touch. It is a lesson older than cities and maps, that to hold the world gently, we must sometimes hold it from afar. The hands that reach for everything will eventually destroy what they love. The eyes that observe from a respectful distance preserve what they see. It is the difference between ownership and understanding. In this quiet balance, the earth finds peace. The places that remain forbidden or remote become part of a larger harmony, unseen but not unloved. Their absence shapes our awareness, reminding us that not everything was meant to be entered, studied, or claimed. We learn to value what we can only imagine. When night arrives, the boundaries fade from sight, but not from being. They remain in the air, subtle as breath, reminding us of the agreements we've made with time and nature. Every horizon, every fence, every untouched plain becomes a promise that in staying on our side, we allow the other side to exist. Distance, then, is not loss but care, not emptiness but protection. It is the world's quiet way of keeping balance, of teaching us that reverence sometimes means simply not stepping forward. Lines we do not cross. There are moments when the earth speaks without sound, when silence itself becomes language. Across deserts, oceans, and mountains, there are places where the air feels different, where even the wind seems to pause. The planet speaks there, not in thunder or quake, but in stillness. It tells us softly, here is where you stop, here is where you only look. These are the lines we do not cross, the thresholds drawn not by human authority, but by something older, something vast and indifferent, yet wise. To stand at such an edge is to feel humility return to its rightful place inside us. We learn, slowly, that silence is not emptiness, it is communication in another form, a glacier that creaks beneath its weight, a volcanic plain that steams in warning, a forest so dense that light itself seems to hesitate. Each tells us to stay back, to observe from a respectful distance. The world does not forbid, it invites awareness. It reminds us that the act of stopping can be as meaningful as the act of exploring. In that stillness, restraint becomes reverence and curiosity finds its gentler twin, understanding. Not every place is meant for our presence. There are lands that heal themselves through isolation, coral reefs recovering in quiet bays, tundras that breathe beneath snow untouched by footprints, caves where ancient air still holds its first breath. When we intrude, even gently, we alter what we came to admire. Our smallest motion can unsettle a pattern that has taken centuries to form. And so the earth marks boundaries, invisible but undeniable, asking us to listen before we move. Listening is its own form of care. It means accepting that knowledge is not always a gift we are ready for. Some secrets of the world remain wrapped in their own necessity, hidden not out of malice but out of balance. The ocean floor, the deep forest, the frozen poles, they guard stories written in ice and coral, stories that unfold only when the time is right. Our need to uncover everything, to name and measure, often blinds us to the wisdom of what remains unseen. The lines we do not cross are not denials, they are invitations to patience. There is beauty in distance. From afar we see more clearly how the world shapes itself, how storms build and fade, how mountains breathe clouds into the sky. We are part of this rhythm, yet we are also meant to observe it. The planet's silence becomes a mirror for our own stillness. We begin to understand that restraint is not limitation, but harmony. It is the way the world preserves itself, by teaching us when to pause. Sometimes these lines are physical, an untraveled island, a quarantined forest, a border where the soil still remembers the heat of disaster. Other times they are intangible. Cultural taboos, sacred spaces, unspoken understandings passed quietly from one generation to another. In each case, the message is the same: do not cross without purpose, and even then, move gently. What we call wilderness, others might call sanctuary. What we see as discovery, the earth might experience as intrusion. To listen truly is to hear beyond ourselves. When the wind moves through reeds, when waves break on empty shores, when mountains echo only the sound of their own thaw, we are being spoken to, reminded that the world does not depend on our presence to be complete. In those moments, our silence becomes a gift, the rare instance when humanity gives something back simply by withholding its touch. The absence of our footsteps allows the world to breathe in full measure, unbroken, unobserved. There is a kind of peace that comes only from standing still. The mind, accustomed to motion, begins to settle. The eyes soften, the breath slows, and we start to see the landscape not as territory, but as being alive, aware, self-sustaining. These are not empty spaces, they are places engaged in their own quiet existence. To cross them would be to interrupt their dialogue with time. As night gathers, the horizon fades and the unseen deepens. The line remains even when our eyes can no longer trace it. It exists in our awareness, a boundary drawn in respect, not in fear. Somewhere in that vast silence, the earth continues its ancient rhythm, the slow turn of rock, the breath of tide, the whisper of leaves, and we, standing still, become part of that rhythm by not disturbing it. In the end, The lines we do not cross define us as much as the ones we do. They reveal the shape of our humility, the quiet logic of coexistence. To step back is not to lose the world, but to honor it. In that moment of restraint, we give space for the planet to breathe, to heal, to simply be. And in return, we too are allowed to rest, to listen, and to belong again to the stillness that once taught us how to care. The invisible order. Across the quiet margins of the world, there exists a system so subtle it almost escapes perception. An order not written in books or carved into monuments, not enforced by armies or decrees. It moves beneath the visible fabric of civilization, carried out by hands that rarely appear in photographs or history. Governments, scientists, and quiet caretakers preserve the equilibrium of this hidden structure. They work not in pursuit of glory, but in respect for fragility. Theirs is a stewardship defined by restraint. They do not rule the earth, they listen to it, interpret its silences, and understand that preservation often requires invisibility. Far from cities, in places few people think about, their quiet vigilance continues. Along forgotten coastlines, laboratories hum through the night. Inside, machines breathe in rhythm with the tides, recording data in long streams of light. Air is sampled, water filtered, soil examined, not for conquest but for comprehension. The work is patient, delicate, almost reverential. The scientists there know that every test has weight, that even the smallest act of measurement changes what is measured. They step carefully through their rituals of observation, gather fragments of knowledge, then withdraw. This, more than any law, defines the invisible order. Control without dominance, protection without possession, vigilance without intrusion. Elsewhere, entire regions are marked only by silence. On public maps they appear as voids, blurs, or anonymous shapes in blue and green. No roads lead in, no signs declare ownership. Yet these empty coordinates are among the most carefully tended places on Earth. Deserts sealed since the age of atomic testing still hum faintly with unseen power. Islands bloom with species that evolved without witness. Valleys breathe quietly through the poisoned soil of forgotten industries, their danger contained by distance and time. Each space is guarded not to hide but to shield, to prevent harm from spreading, to let decay finish its long work. Access here is not denied in anger, but withheld in wisdom. Over the years, these invisible borders become part of the landscape's logic. The habits of caution harden into unspoken law. Cartographers redraw their maps with gaps that look accidental, but are deliberate, places where the page is left blank as a gesture of care. The white space on a chart is not emptiness, it is reverence. It says, here we choose to look away. Every blank coordinate whispers a truth too quiet for ordinary attention. That the planet is still layered, still mysterious, still holding back parts of itself that our curiosity must not disturb. Some of those layers wait for later generations, others perhaps wait for none at all. Governments keep their records carefully, sealed in drawers and digital vaults. Files exist, but their contents are partial, coded, or redacted, not to deceive, but to protect. The administrators of these silences understand that information can be as dangerous as ignorance. Scientists, fluent in this cautious language, speak of thresholds, containment, and limits. They do not believe in mastery, they believe in balance. To measure the decay of radiation, the recovery of a forest, or the slow cleansing of water, is to watch the world repair itself at its own pace. In this work, patience is a principle. Their silence is a promise. That knowledge will not run faster than responsibility. The caretakers, those who keep watch on the ground, are quieter still. A ranger walking through an empty field hears the faint pulse of a Geiger counter like an insect's call, measuring the invisible hum left by history. A biologist aboard a small vessel drifts through restricted waters, logging light, current, and temperature, never diving beneath the surface she protects. In archives cooled to near stillness, technicians examine grains of earth taken from long-closed sites, reading in their composition the memory of disaster and renewal. None of these names are known, none appear in headlines. Yet their labor forms the skeleton of our collective safety, a framework of care that keeps civilization balanced on the edge between curiosity and caution. At night, in these restricted zones, the quiet deepens until it feels like a presence. The stars above gleam with unusual clarity, their light unbroken by city haze. No houses, no roads, only the faint hum of instruments, the rhythmic pulse of data being written in unseen code. The air feels untouched, almost solemn. It is in this stillness that the invisible order reveals its nature. It depends not on force, but on trust, a mutual agreement between those who understand and those who refrain from interfering. It is an order born of cooperation between wisdom and restraint, fragile but enduring because it is human in the best sense, self-disciplined, humble, aware of limits. Yet even this order must change. Time wears at its edges, technology evolves, and climates shift. Some forbidden lands soften into sanctuaries reclaimed by nature's patience. Forests grow through barbed wire, birds nest in empty guard towers, and flowers root in once toxic ground. The land does not forget, but it forgives. Elsewhere, other regions remain sealed forever, their danger too deep, their silence too necessary. The earth rearranges its secrets continuously. What was once restricted by science may one day be preserved by reverence. The invisible order adapts, moving fluidly between practicality and faith, turning boundaries into rituals of respect. There is comfort in knowing that not all is revealed. Mystery, once feared, has become part of balance. It reminds us that knowledge carries weight, that wisdom is not a destination, but a rhythm. The unseen boundaries on our maps are not failures of exploration, they are acknowledgements of grace. Even in a century of satellites and sensors, the planet still keeps something for itself, something unmeasured, unspoken, unsolved. It chooses to remain partly opaque, as all living things do, holding within its depths a silence that sustains the rest. And so the invisible order continues, not as conspiracy or hidden empire, but as a quiet covenant between curiosity and care. It exists in small gestures, in the hesitation before crossing a line, in the decision to close a door softly instead of forcing it open. It lives in the moment when a scientist deletes a line of data out of caution, or when a pilot veers away from a no-fly zone drawn only in memory. Over time, this restraint becomes instinct, and instinct becomes ethic. The rules fade into the fabric of thought until they are no longer rules at all, only understanding. When we look at the blankness on a map, we are not seeing what is missing, we are seeing what has been spared. Each unmarked region is the Earth's quiet request for patience, a reminder that preservation sometimes looks like emptiness. Some layers of the world belong to us now, others wait beyond reach, not to be conquered, but to remain whole. The invisible order promises no revelation, only continuity. It assures us that the world will continue breathing, slowly, softly, in its own time, even when we are not looking, even when our instruments fall silent. And perhaps the greatest wisdom of all is this: to let it, top of form, bottom of form, top of form, bottom of form, top of form, the gentle mystery. As the long journey begins to fold into its ending, The road ahead softens and the air itself seems to slow. The echoes of discovery fade, replaced by something quieter. Not silence exactly, but a kind of stillness that carries memory. We drift back toward familiar ground, yet the familiar feels altered, washed in a calm light that wasn't there before. What once called for explanation now simply exists. The need to know gives way to the need to breathe. Around us, the unseen hums softly, as if the world was singing beneath its breath. The unknown no longer demands attention. It whispers instead from behind the fences we built, from the fog that blurs the edges of things, from the darkness that waits beyond the last lamp of knowledge. This is not the mystery of danger or thrill. It does not entice with promises or threaten with fear. It is a softer mystery, a quieter one, the kind that moves beneath the surface of thought, reminding us that not everything must be seen to be real. The earth has always held secrets that were never meant to be uncovered. Some of them belong to time itself. Layers of stone that remember before memory existed, patterns in wind and water that repeat themselves through centuries, slow rhythms of decay and renewal that need no witness. Others belong to life, the silent communication of trees through their roots, the migrations of birds guided by unseen stars, the subtle balance of creatures that live and die unnoticed. These are not puzzles to be solved. They are truths that live best in silence. We once believed that mystery existed to be conquered. We mapped, measured, divided and named, chasing the idea that knowledge could complete the world. But each discovery revealed more distance. Each answer opened new questions. We realized, slowly and without fanfare, that mystery is not the absence of knowledge. It is the boundary of meaning. It is the space where understanding gives way to awe. To stand at that boundary is not failure, it is grace. The unknown invites humility, the rare acknowledgement that our vision, though vast, is not infinite. The world continues beyond it, whole and unbroken. There are places where the unknown still lives in physical form, misty forests untouched by human steps, islands protected by law and distance, deep trenches where light has never reached. They exist like pauses in the language of the planet, silences that hold everything together. Beyond those boundaries, life moves according to rules older than ours. Coral reefs bloom and fade in cycles of their own design. Seeds fall into soil that has never been turned, and animals follow paths written into their instincts long before memory began. When we keep our distance, the world restores itself. When we listen instead of act, we become part of its healing. Mystery, when quiet, becomes a form of rest. It is the moment when curiosity softens into reverence, when the mind no longer races to categorize and simply observes. In this quietness, we rediscover the value of unknowing, that calm acceptance that the earth does not owe us its secrets. It gives us air to breathe, water to drink, soil to stand upon, and still keeps part of itself beyond reach. That hidden part is not a barrier but a mercy, a reminder that life is not defined by what we own or understand. The unseen sustains the seen. The mystery beneath the surface keeps balance above it. The fog that rolls across the horizon does not obscure the world, it protects it. It slows our vision so we can finally look inward. What lies beyond that fog might be familiar, or it might be entirely unknown. But in not knowing, we are free. For the first time, we stop trying to possess. We let the landscape breathe without us, and we begin to match its rhythm. The wind shifts, carrying a low hum through the trees, and we understand that sound not as message, but as existence. The world continues whether or not we witness it, and that continuity, unobserved, uninterrupted, is the purest form of beauty. At night, the map fades, its coordinates dissolve into shadow, its edges blur into a seamless horizon. We realize that the map was never the territory and that our knowledge, though vast, was only ever a translation, a way of holding something too large to hold. The real world, the one that breathes and sleeps beneath our measurements, continues without our guidance. The stars reappear, scattered and ancient, their light traveling for ages to meet us, only to fade against the curve of our eyelids. They do not explain themselves. They have never needed to. Their silence is their language. There is a moment, always brief, always soft, when the mind begins to drift towards sleep and the body loosens its hold on the day. In that moment, all distances vanish. The unseen comes closer, the boundaries between world and self dissolve. The hum we hear is no longer external, it beats within us. The mystery is not outside, it is part of what we are. Every breath we take is an act of trust in the unseen, in the systems of life that function quietly beneath our awareness. We live suspended in a balance we did not create and can never fully comprehend. And that is enough. To let go of understanding is not to fall into ignorance. It is to step into harmony. The world does not ask to be explained. It asks to be heard. When we fall silent, truly silent, the earth answers in kind. The grass moves with the wind. The sea breathes in long intervals. The mountains shift imperceptibly beneath the stars. The gentle mystery holds all of this together, not as secret, but as truth too large for language. And so, as the night deepens, we surrender to it. The fences, the boundaries, the careful lines on maps all disappear into the same shade of darkness. The air grows cool, the sound of insects rises like distant static, and the unseen world continues its slow conversation with itself. We are no longer explorers or observers. We are participants in quiet. The unknown no longer waits to be solved, it waits to be respected. The silence stretches on, wide and tender, reminding us that the earth, in its wisdom, keeps something for itself, something we can feel but never hold. So breathe slowly now, let the eyes close. The night hums softly beyond the window, carrying its endless, untranslatable story. You do not need to follow it. You only need to listen. The mystery is here, not far away, not hidden, but all around. The stars burn above you, the oceans turn beneath them, the forests exhale their cool breath into the wind. And somewhere in that vast, invisible rhythm, the world continues, whole, alive, and beautifully unknowable. The map fades into darkness. The sound of your breathing joins the silence. And the night, eternal and patient, carries you onward into the gentle mystery that never ends. Night settles over the landscape of memory, and the 7 parts drift together like slow-moving stars. What began with the quiet ruins and the logic of distance ends here, in stillness. Through every boundary, every silence, the same truth has been whispering, that care is not loud, and understanding often wears the shape of restraint. The world, in its hidden layers, is not asking to be solved, it is asking to be allowed. We have followed the traces of the protected ruins where time itself was the guardian, and through the invisible lines drawn not by fear, but by kindness. We have seen how distance can become a form of love, how not crossing a threshold can be a gesture of reverence. In the invisible order that holds these places together, we found no force, only quiet agreement. An unspoken covenant between the earth and those who walk gently upon it. Every unseen valley, every unmarked coordinate, every sealed horizon carries the same invitation to pause, to let the planet breathe without our footsteps, to remember that preservation is not possession. The caretakers, the scientists, the watchful hands who keep the silence intact. They are only reflections of what the world has always known. Balance is kept not by control, but by respect. As the journey ends, the unseen hums softly beneath the darkness. The air moves like a slow heartbeat. The map fades. And in the deep quiet, mystery becomes peace. The world continues to turn, its layers unfolding beyond sight, its hidden rhythms untouched. The gentle truth of all we have traveled through remains simple. That wisdom does not always arrive as discovery, but sometimes as stillness, as the choice to stop and listen. So let the night take its shape around you. Let the boundaries blur into calm. Somewhere beyond the reach of sound or light, the earth continues its patient breathing. You are part of that breath now. Steady, present, quiet. The unseen world hums softly through the dark, asking nothing, needing nothing. Only this, that you rest and let it go on.